digging through the... Oh, there's the... That's a great one.
Now, here was Trios and Solos.
Oh, my dear
I
Lord.
made my own cover for it.
That's the best album ever right there. ECM.
That's because we've broken the law by doing it.
Right.
Ireland, so
Multiple copies of that. I love it.
here's,
That's my favorite.
That's the introducing. But then, I must have, here, do you have a record player?
Yo, that's all I listen to.
Ah, well, there you go.
Oh,
I have
oh, thank you.
multiples of that, plus New Rapids. Oh, here's Annette Peacock's album that you're going to...
That's the one.
Yeah.
I'm the one. Just reissued Glen all over this album, dude.
Yeah, I couldn't even find me on there. She did so many things. And by this time, because of all the...
You couldn't hear yourself on there? Or what do you mean you couldn't find yourself?
Yeah, I didn't even know where I was. But here was the first band I worked with.
Are you on that album?
This one?
I think Eddie Gomez. I have that
Eddie
album.
Gomez.
Yeah, but you
Eddie
were...
Gomez is on this one, but I was on the next one, and the picture was still him at a live concert.
I don't think I've ever seen it. I didn't know there was another Saders album. I didn't know that there was another...
Another Saders album.
Yeah.
Oh, no, I did a... this was a Tim Harden album.
Right. Bird on a Wire or something.
No, that's the one that I'm on.
You and
But
Muzan are on that one.
This was a live one from Town Hall.
Whoa. It was pressed on vinyl?
Yeah. Let me see. Oh, man, this is the greatest album of all time.
Oh, my God. Wait. What?
Yeah.
Oh, my God.
And
Oh, yeah, I forgot about that.
here's Friends. Oh, my God. All these things.
Oh,
And
Colin,
there
my
I
God,
have-
Jesus.
Electra. Oh, this must be the live album. Carnegie Hall and everything, the test pressing. I didn't know I had that. Here's one of the most important albums.
Now, what year is that?
Oh,
It's 60
everything was done in between 60, 61. By 61, he was dead. They were about...
So
years.
that was a Motion LaFaro deal,
Yeah.
this one here.
There's the David Friesen. There's Atlanta. That's one of my favorites.
Oh,
Art
yeah.
Landy.
Oh, my hero, Landy, dude.
He's here, you know.
He's in Zona?
He comes down here in the winter.
No, to Arivaca?
Oh, there is a great Ralph solo album.
Dude,
Here's a Cyrus.
no, and
Fire.
that, dude, I have that. I have that because of Glen Moore. But it doesn't tell me what tracks you play on.
Oh,
Just because there's several bass players on it.
yeah. Yeah, here was...
Unbelievable.
Here's a red record. I love this.
Yeah, no. Fantasy. Was it LaFaro's on that? Is that what you have?
Farrow is
Yeah.
on this, and so is
Johnny
Billy
Ray?
Higgins.
Billy?
It was their first, one of their first records they ever did.
Probably one of the first West Coast states,
Yeah.
you know?
Fantasy, a red record.
Let's see that red record. Ah, come on.
I've got it. So, then there's Oregon.
Well, that one, WBAI or something, live in the studio.
This one was a concert in Vanguard's building.
That's right. Maynard Solomon.
And here's Colin's living room.
Jason Robards' house.
Yeah, that's the place where we
Yep.
first rehearsed and played and got ready for all the shit we did.
So cool.
Yeah. Winter Light. Ugh. Yeah. Then.
Where's Dominici's Dream?
Oh yeah, Dragon Eddie's.
Yeah, Dragon Eddie's.
Dragon Eddie's.
Dragon Eddie's Dream, man.
Yeah. Now I may only have a cassette of it. I'll see. 45th Parallel. Oh, I was wanting to listen to that.
Oh, nice.
But I don't even have a record player anymore.
I'm gonna have to bring you down one.
Oh,
then.
here's another Bill Evans.
Oh dear.
Here's Robbie Abu Khalil.
Right. We
That was a great record.
Glenville.
There was a bird hitting the window.
Sonny Fortune on that.
Oh my God, yes. He and I played so well together in that band. Oh my God. It was, there's Fortune Jazz. That's the first Evans and LaFaro.
Motion was on all of them as a drummer?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that that's introducing Glen more again. Now, don't I have? I should Swingle Singers.
Is Joe Bonner? No, that's just like Friends. But you weren't on that, were you?
Do you know this?
I very well, but you're not on it though.
No,
yeah.
But I played.
It's cool though. Jan's playing drums.
Every day for a couple of years, I played with Homer. He and I rehearsed and played together. This was. What are you doing in there?
Birds and dogs.
Oh man.
Oh dear, the oud.
There. That was the first Rabia album. That was fantastic. Maybe I don't even have one of these. I should have. There's the Spignet one.
Oh, that's my dude. I love yeah. And then there's one. I don't know if you have it. Seifert did a solo album that you're on. I think it's on like Columbia maybe from like right around this time.
He did. He came. I don't think I have a copy.
Yeah.
No, I guess I don't. I must only have it on. I mean, I have somewhere. I have a test pressing.
Yeah.
But, and I just found all the art from it, and I don't even know where it went. So never mind.
I want to go back to the Dream song. But that cat, and excuse me because I'm going to butcher his name. He had to come up because it was the first time they were trying to play Beethoven's music in France.
Yeah, trying to play Beethoven.
So he had to come up with his own tuning. Is that?
So what they decided to do, because there were 5 orchestras in Paris at the time, and they could not find enough bass players who could even play the bass at all. And because it was tuned in fifths, it was a much bigger chore than it is now. So what they did was they called this world. I even have a long article about it. They changed the tuning to fourths, like the bottom 4 strings on regular guitar,
sure.
E, A, D, and G, thinking that it would be easier to play. And when jazz music came around, like a century later, it was easier to play the fourths than the fifths. And so by that time, I mean, initially the tuba was really the
Absolutely
first bass instrument, and then the gut stringed.
We had Slam Stewart, Milt Hinton, those cats.
Yeah, all that.
Sure.
There's a tape out there
Yeah.
of Ray Brown in some foreign country doing a clinic, and he goes through a whole. I have it on my old computer, which I can't take anything off of. But here's Ray explaining how he used to play when he was first starting out, and he's slapping everything. You had to learn to play T for 2, where you play the melody and the bass line, and you're the drum too, because you're slapping the thing. He said, well, he said, I don't do it very well, but of course he did it very well, and there it was. So he's showing what it was really like at the very beginning. And so the fourths tuning worked its way into classical music, and consequently into all musics. At the time Beethoven wrote his stuff, there was a guy named Domenico Dragonetti who was Italian, and he kept going to England because they were great. He had a lot of friends there. Mm-hmm. They loved his playing. And when they played Beethoven in England, there was no conductor in that music in that time, even though in the movies they use a conductor.
No conductor at that time.
No conductor.
Love
there
it.
Was not
Love it.
What they would do was, in England, they would put Dragonetti in the middle. The musicians would all face this circle, and he, with his bow, would basically
conduct.
conduct the, you know.
No rhythm section outside of the upright bass. There was no timpani or drums or you know.
Oh, no. Well, there were percussionists.
There were percussionists, okay, but the bass, he was driving the orchestra. Yeah.
He was there, and so the French kept trying to get him to come and teach in Paris so they could have, and he said, I can't do it. I've got concerts all over Italy this year and next year, and I'm here in England, and it's not that easy. I have to, like a foreigner in those days could not own any land in England.
If you were not English.
Yeah, if you weren't English, you couldn't. And so you had to have some friends who were great letter writers and knew all the movers and shakers in order to even be there. But Haydn was writing at the same time.
So he was essentially conducting.
And he was very famous for this, and people kept trying to get him. The French tried to get him to come there, and when they couldn't get him to come, they decided to change the law, change the rules.
Oh, I see. Yeah. Okay.
So that they supposedly could just pick up people off the street. You know,
the Glen Moors on the street. You know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the streets were littered with people who knew E, A, D, and G. So
wow.
So Dragonetti. I mean, the songs that I wrote and that whole album was really pretty much dedicated to them. You want
to play a little of the different tunings you've been working on?
So I went back when I moved down here.
Arivaca.
I had a student in Portland who had gone back to the fifth tuning, and I've been listening quite a bit to Red Mitchell, and in an album with
with Joe Beck.
No, this is with a saxophonist, who was Lenny Tristan.
Oh yeah, no, Lee Konitz. Lee
Konitz. So he and Konitz made an album.
Yes.
And it started, one of the tunes. It was just one of those things, just one of those crazy flings. So it started like that, and I listened to it again, and I think this was in Portland. Samantha had gone somewhere and was out of town for a few days, and so I cobbled together a set of strings that didn't sound very good, but that were a G here instead of an A. So this one was real loose. Instead of a G, I had an A here, so this one was too tight. But I had enough to get a feeling for what that was, and realize that line that I'm playing could be played with fourth tuning, but instead of being across 3 strings, it was across 4 strings.
Wow.
And really difficult to get. There was no way to sound relaxed and like you could put a little something extra on and go.
Sure.
Without, it was just like next to impossible. And I'd been trying for several years to do a thing that I had discovered in my studying of dominant scales, that on here I could do this. So that let me go across 3 strings and play those things. And on fourth tuning, I wrote a song, took it to the studio, and I put it on an album that we made called family or something. And it just, I had to slow it way down in order to get it, and it didn't really work. I pretty much fucked it up. It was just a duet with Mark, and I realized then that I was trying to do something that I could not do with the tuning that I had. And by that time, I was back to fourth tuning for that album. It was an album that should have been recorded live because we did a week gig at Birdland. And then we went in the studio, and the studio had a pretty terrible piano that Ralph couldn't really.
You couldn't bang it back into tune.
It just didn't.
Yeah.
Yeah, bang it back in tune, exactly. So we ended up going to the studio and having a hell of a time making this album. We made it, but in the live gigs the week before that, we played all of those things, lots of new music, and we played it perfectly.
It was burning, yeah.
And then we couldn't do it by the time we got back in. But that was one of the things I was trying to do at the time, and so it didn't matter whether live, I guess I wouldn't have tried that. But,
I want to ask you, this is something that just popped into my, because we talked about it, but you told this great story about Ken Kesey at Naropa talking to these farmers, a bunch of rednecks, and it wasn't publicized very well. But did you meet Art Landy at Naropa? Because there was nothing more avant-garde in the jazz music world than what was going, and that more in the 70s. But I'm just curious about your involvement in music at Naropa.
Well, at Naropa, Landy was not.
He wasn't there yet because they were doing the sophisticated
No, when Oregon went to Europe for the first time with ECM, 1974 or 73 maybe it was.
I just want to be clear, the Duos album with Towner, that was 71, but that wasn't Oregon. It was just you and him over there.
That was in 72.
Right. And that was, yeah.
And that was for Manfred. That was the first thing. So then, having done that, at the same time, that fall, we did that album for Manfred and Music of Another Present Era for Vanguard.
Got it.
And then we went to Europe to tour. And now they've just released an album called 1974. Have you seen that?
No.
Well,
First time Oregon.
Go to Amazon. It's from that first tour in Europe, recorded by one of the radio stations. So it was 74 because 1974 is the name of it.
Radio broadcast of Oregon.
Yeah, it was a live concert.
Wow.
And now they're doing another one too. One with Treelock, that's recorded live in a German town.
Like early 80s kind of thing?
Yeah, with Treelock. So it would have been.
So let's go back. I don't want to get too lost here. How does it in Naropa? How does that tie in with
Okay, so when we went to Europe, Jan Garbarek had just released an album called Wichitaito. And they had released this Art Landy album, Red Lanta.
That's right.
That I showed you earlier, and where Garbarek is just sight reading through a bunch of Art's music. They just have a pile of music on the piano, and here, look at this. Yeah, maybe do I this or that, and go ahead and play it. So we heard that album. I heard Art, and I loved that album. And I wrote Art a letter and said, Art, you don't know me, but hey. So Art sent me 2 tunes, 2 pieces of music. After that letter I wrote to him. And then 2 years later, we were in San Francisco for the first time.
Wow.
And Paul had met Art already somehow or another. We ended up going and visiting Art, and we were working for a week in some place, I don't even know where, maybe the Great American Music Hall. But we were in San Francisco for a week. And
did he live out in Bolinas or something? Yeah, right.
Yeah, he lived in
Swallow was out there. Yeah. Oh, not then, but yeah.
Swallow, yeah, not then.
Yeah.
But Swallow had been out there. So we went to Arts, and we just played all day, every day.
Oh my gosh.
And I think we had a few days off because we really got in some good time. Played some basketball, and because he's a basketball guy.
I love it.
And So I met Art, and then we became like really close then. And eventually, I mean, when I met my wife, Art and Paul and I were playing concerts on the Oregon coast,
Oh my gosh.
which was like kind of like living down here, pretty far away from anything. But so yeah,
You were playing with a drummerless trio.
yeah.
That is there? So a couple things. I assume nobody had the tape recorder on when you were jamming at Art's house back in '76.
You know, if there were anything, there'd be a cassette somewhere.
And then the McCandless gigs with Art. That was more like maybe a couple decades ago. It wasn't that.
Well, it was in the late '70s.
Really?
Yeah, because Paul and I, we ended up on, when we had a chance to choose a record company, we ECM wanted us and Vanguard wanted us. And because Vanguard was in New York, where we all lived at the time, and we could all get there with a short subway ride or even walking.
And basically, I just want to be
on
clear.
23rd Street.
Also, you had quite a bit of flexibility with studio time there. I know cats could you go in at night and just play.
Yeah, well, we had to go in at night because in those days, the people that worked we essentially worked for the record company, which owned the studio.
Sure.
And they would rent it out whenever they could, and if they couldn't, then most jazz music was recorded at night after somebody's gig.
Absolutely.
So you'd stay up all night, and usually the student engineers would come in and be the ones to record it because the other guys are sleeping like.
Dude, they made their dough during the day. You know, yeah, I did. I did.
So, I mean, that's when I first played with Larry Young.
Dude, I'm so glad you brought him up, man, because we didn't talk about. You're telling me it was just a jam session, or were you like?
We walked into a studio, and here was a guy playing the organ.
Not Vanguard Studio.
No.
No,
this was another. There would be, word would go around. Hey, some of the cats, like the Breckers, are up at this address.
Liebman's house or something.
Fall by.
Yeah, fall by.
So we fell by, and there was Larry Young playing the organ.
My God.
Wow, this guy plays great. And then, I met in '68, in the spring of '68, David Holland and John McLaughlin moved to New York. And David Holland came to play with Miles, and McLaughlin came to play with Tony.
That's exactly right, although I want to just be clear. Tony picked up John from the airport, and the next day he was on In a Silent Way. I think that does that sound right?
Could be.
Yeah, I'm just trying to figure out what year that. Anyway,
almost immediately.
Yeah, no, Holland definitely. Miles tracked him down in England, left him his number, and the next thing so you met them in the studio or on the band?
'68. Where did I meet them?
Were you going up to Harlem?
Not that much.
Yeah,
Dave lived on like 68th, I think, and near between Amsterdam and Central Park West. And I forget.
Anyway, the buzz was around these. You did not know them prior to them coming to the States, right?
No, not at all.
Yeah.
I met David. He was doing macrobiotics. I was doing macrobiotics.
Wow.
And we had, maybe it was through Hal Galper. I mean, things would happen. There were a lot of...
But it's possible that, like, at these loft sessions, that's maybe where you first bumped into them.
Yeah, somehow.
Yeah.
So there was Dave playing with Miles. So I started going to all the Miles gigs that were...
They play like the Blue Coronet or something? Like, where they play Brooklyn? Like, where would you go see them?
In town.
Maybe the Half
I
Note?
went to Miles's house.
Whoa.
When they were playing the Newport Jazz Festival. Miles bought a Volkswagen bus because he kept not being able to find ways to get the bass and the drums to these drive out of New York gigs.
I dig.
So
he bought a VW bus.
Yeah, he bought a VW bus, and Dave said, "Well, I can drive it." So Dave and I went up to Miles's place, knocked on the door. He's on like 78th or something like that, somewhere in there, kind of near Riverside or 7th Avenue. And walked in the door, and Miles was pissed because when he went to park this Volkswagen, but he went to pick up this Volkswagen wherever, and he parked it in this parking lot. And then when he was getting ready to walk out of the parking lot, I think it was I don't know, it was the morning. It seemed like it might have almost been a weekend morning or something, but that doesn't quite make sense. Because we were going to get the bus and going to drive up to Newport. And we had some LSD. We were going to take that.
Wow. 68? 68 roughly?
68.
Yeah.
So.
This is before Bitches Brew.
Yeah. Before Bitches Brew. And so but Silent Way, in a Silent Way Miles had gotten tapes back, because when we came back, we drove up there anyway. We went up, there was, Sun Ra played.
Dude, I can't imagine that list. Dizzy? I mean, who knows?
Miles, it was, and the scene backstage was just wild.
Oh my, all the Titans were still alive, rocking.
Still alive.
Rocking.
And,
holy cow.
Yeah, all the cats were there. And, and Miles said, well, we said, well, we're going to drive up now. And he said, what are you cats? Are you going up to look for the bitches, or what are you doing? And we're like, well, we're going to go and,
hang.
Take a little hang. And so
drop
we
some
went
acid,
up
yeah.
And he said, oh, I know you young guys. And then, as soon as we got up there, got outside parked in some like little campground place, Miles drove up in a Maserati or something with some beautiful woman, and he was the one that was there for the bitches. And
of course he was. He followed. He pulled right in behind.
And we just taken LSD, and he
oh my God, this is so great.
There we are. We're sort of like,
oh my, it's Miles.
And so then we did all the things happened that weekend. The music happened. I got to hear Sun Ra. And
Dave was already playing with Miles.
Yeah.
So you didn't have a gig. You were just there as a
I was
spectator.
Because Dave said, hey,
come on up.
Want to come?
Yeah.
And because we had gotten into macrobiotic things, there was a whole scene going on with that. And so we were cooking meals, brown rice, and
everybody was, Coriel was eating brown. Everybody was eating that.
I did it because I couldn't afford meat. I didn't have the money.
This is beyond, man. This is so great. Really, I mean, it was meat was out of the budget for Glen.
Yeah, it was out. Well, 68, I was there all through the spring and summer. I still had a little apartment, but I soon lost it, and I couldn't really afford to even pay rent. So what happened? Well, so we came back.
Yeah,
this is for you, because this is important. So we came back, and Miles, when we returned the van late at night, like by midnight or something like that, we get back to New York just because we'd taken acid the day before.
Yeah, you're still on the trip.
Yeah, we were tripping out.
Yeah.
So we were like ready to go and hang it up. And Miles says, "Oh, hey, Kyan, I just got the tapes from what became In a Silent Way." And so he played it for us, and it was very spacey, and we were very tired, and so we started falling asleep.
Right.
Just standing there in his bedroom listening to it. So he gets out his trumpet, and he plays along. And at the end of this time, he said, "Oh, well, I'm going to have to go back in and put some more something in there, because if you cats are falling asleep, I don't want that." So,
dude, and he did.
Yeah, he's really.
Oh my God.
He was tremendously susceptible to everything.
You weren't like Miles, were jaded after a 48-hour acid trip,
No.
Because that is the spaciest. I mean, it's something that I've recently been only getting into last couple of years, and In a Silent Way, it's really I mean, it's Space Cadet
Yeah,
Central.
yeah, it's really wonderful.
A lot of repetitive, almost like drone kind of, you know, like that kind of stuff, you know?
Yeah, they're just trying stuff.
Right.
And he was recording with a lot of people. I mean, eventually Colin recorded with him. He did On the Corner. He's on that album.
Colin's on the corner. So Miles was a big fan of yours. Would he come dig Oregon? He would come check you guys out?
No, he never checked us out. But
because he would go down and see Dreams. He would go. Brecker had a wah-wah on his trumpet and you know that kind of stuff. But he
would have. But we weren't. Oregon wasn't playing yet. So this is
That's
68.
That's right.
Ralph hasn't even come to New York yet.
Okay.
That wasn't until
he was in rural Oregon or Washington somewhere.
In Washington.
Yeah.
Still living in Seattle, I think. Yeah, that's where he was at that point. And so the Larry Young thing. So eventually, here as I'm Dave's friends, I meet a guy named Jimmy Stevenson, who was a guy who'd been a bass player. And the very first jam session I went to, I don't know how, you know, I go to a club and meet a musician and somebody say, well, hey, what are you doing during the day? And I'm like, nothing, what's up? And so I ended up getting invited just up the street, and this eventually linked, it was Warren Bernhardt.
Oh, rest in peace. What a legend.
Yeah, he was, but somehow or another, Jimmy Stevenson found me because of Warren, but Warren wasn't there. Jimmy was playing piano by this time because once he took too much acid, he couldn't play the bass anymore. It was too hard. The piano was tuned by somebody else.
Interesting.
So he would do that.
Stevenson was an acid.
With a lot of people, and he had Beaver Harris.
Oh, dude, come on, dude.
Yeah.
This is
So we did a concert of Jimmy's music and with Beaver Harris playing drums, and McLaughlin came. And McLaughlin just showed up with his guitar. He'd never heard the music before. He just plugged in and played everything with us.
This was a gig. This was a gig.
This was a gig.
This was a gig. Oh my.
In the church that's right next to Washington Square Park, just west of it.
I know, and it's on the tip of my tongue. They still have sangas. Yes.
It's on West 4th. Steig lived across the street.
Oh dear. This is what I need.
Later, Steig's father lived across the street. Steig was still on Bedford Street.
I thought they lived in upstate New York, but maybe that was later. Or maybe that was growing up. Chris Park, that's a whole other thing. The Steigs. Maybe they had multiple houses. Yeah. But the point is that you played in this church.
We played it with, and McLaughlin played everything with us. He'd listen to it and then play it.
With Beaver.
Yeah.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, it was great. And who else did I hear? Also, I heard this guy who was a great classical composer play in that same church. There were several concerts in there that were just far out. What was that guy's name? Oh, man, this is a guy. He's still alive, too. He learned Indian singing. Now he sings ragas. Wow. And he plays with the most experimental bassist there ever was, who was Scordanibio.
Did you like, this is a little bit off the topic, but guys like Stockhausen were, you know, Cage, were encouraging cats to incorporate or augment their instruments with electronics in some way, shape, or form. You know, and I just wonder how you took to that in terms of like, you know, the early pioneers. I know you're going to go towards Bley, but like Subotnick and sort of the early synthetic music, and, you know, how you tried to keep peace with yourself, and because you're playing this beautiful acoustic instrument, but yet adapting to the idea that electronics is essentially just part of sonic expansion.
Well, you know, by this time, Chick is playing. Once Chick starts playing with Miles, pretty soon Miles has got him playing electric piano. Right. And he even got Jarrett to play electric piano.
Vox
He's the
organ.
only one
that
ever got that going.
That would have been a great conversation.
So, and Jan Hammer, who Steig and I did gigs with Jan Hammer. We played the Museum of Modern Art concert with.
Would you play Joyous Lake up in Woodstock?
Oh yeah.
Oh boy, Hammer, Steig, and more at Joyous Lake.
Yeah. Yeah, I heard Taj Mahal there.
Yeah, Butterfield played there all the time.
Yeah.
It was just crazy. I mean, I think Philip Wilson and Gene Dinwiddie used to play there. I mean, it was like that was.
Everybody played.
I'm sorry, I don't mean to keep jumping around here, but I want to go back to how you felt at peace, because you weren't like.
Well, the rest of the Jimmy Stevenson.
Yes, please.
Ties right into that, because the thing that Jimmy did the first day I met him, at the end of it, playing for a couple hours, he said, you're Paul Bley's next bass player. Because Peacock is leaving for Japan, and he's like out of here. And within the 6 months or so, he's gonna leave. And he and Bley aren't getting along anyway, because Bley's living with his ex. And
right.
So he took me on a subway downtown, and we went to 8th Avenue in Hudson and knocked on Bley's door. And he did not answer, because Bley was usually not answered because he probably owed a power bill or something.
Dude, Jake Feinberg, I love it, dude. He was behind on the bills.
Well, but he would only put his money where it actually
I did.
He and Annette had a child, and so these are parents living, and I had a child. And so he took me there, and I didn't meet him. And then, like 2 months later, I met Barry Altschul, who was playing
fantastic drummer,
with Dave and Chick, as they start their thing. And so he invited me to come to he invited me to come and meet Paul Bley. And so I met Paul and started going there for rehearsals like every Saturday, because they had just met Robert Moog. And had a Moog there. And they were just fucking plugging things in, trying to figure out how the hell you got sound out of it at all. So there was electronic music with the person that was really not the best known pianist in the world, but one of the most enterprising and sort of life-changing pianists was Paul Bley.
I agree. So Stevenson, has he left us, by the way? Is he no longer here?
I don't know.
To me, he seems like a catalyst for you.
He moved to California eventually, and I used to be able to reach him. George Winston died the other day, and I just remembered that I got, what was it? Was it Bakersfield? Yeah, I had a gig. I think it was in Bakersfield.
Oh dear, this is classic.
That was.
Was it like a Dixieland? It wasn't.
And I got there, and I was playing. Was I playing solo or? No, maybe I was playing with Danny Smith, the great violinist from Portland. But I went to a gig there, and the guy said, "Well, I didn't know this when we hired you, but there's this piano player who's going to play a few things before." And I was kind of bummed out. And here was George Winston playing. He was just beginning.
Unbelievable. He was starting the solo thing. Yeah.
And he just died very recently.
Absolutely.
He had bad cancer, and he did great things. He used to take Ralph's solo albums with him to interviews, and people would say, "Well, George, you're so great." He said, "This guy is great," and he'd make him play Ralph's albums. He said, "This guy is great."
Dude.
He said, "I'm just lucky."
Dude, I got chills up my arms right now, dude. That's Towner.
Yeah.
Whoa, man, just blowing. Yeah, you play a little bit so I can kind of get my head back in the game a little bit. before I forget, I just found this album by this cat. It's kind of blowing my mind. John Sermon's on it. Sermon. Okay, but the cat that I want to ask you about, Barre Phillips.
Yo.
Dude, Mike Knock told me about him in one of our interviews. I stumbled across this album of his from '76, right around the time that you guys first were going to Europe and stuff. But I mean, it's called Mountainscapes, and it's vicious. But Barre Phillips, when did he come into your consciousness?
Okay, Barre, I met. Where did I meet Barre?
Because he was living down in Alphabet City, I think, with like Coriel, Wheaton Brown Rice, Knock. The Youngbloods lived down there, but I'm not sure if
He was in New York for a minute.
A hot minute, yeah.
He was from the West Coast.
Wow.
And grew up in Stanford. Stanford, I think?
Palo Alto?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he was there. They didn't have, I guess, he was in high school, and they didn't have a bass player at the college. And so somebody invited him and said, well, this kid can play anyway. So he went there.
Stanford.
So, yeah, went to Stanford and played and met all these guys. He ended up forming a band that was like a cover tune band. They went to Hawaii and stayed there for several months and played.
Very typical of that time, absolutely.
It was absolutely, they were just, all you had to do was listen to Miles' latest albums, and if you didn't know those things within a month, you were a poser and didn't deserve.
I dig it, dude. I cannot imagine. Yeah. Go ahead.
So there he was. So they go back to San Francisco to like they're coming back and big audience and everything, and they're playing someplace. It's a kind of session somehow, and Ornette Coleman walks up with his saxophone and says, so this is what you guys do? You just like play other people's shit? And Barre said that within a month, every one of those people, these guys have been successful. They've all gotten married. They've got kids. They've got families. They drive cars. They pay their way. And they're playing Lambert Hendricks and Ross stuff. And they're playing.
Because that's where the gigs are. Yeah.
That's what they. So within a very short time, the group split up. And Barre left, had some connection on the East Coast, went to New York, got Rolfed, which I think was some kind of trip with, he explained this thing to me. I think they were taking acid and then having, it was like some scientific experiment with
Leary?
You'd take it once a week. Somebody who wasn't taking it that day would accompany you.
A guide, yes.
Be your kind of a guide, or make sure you could get on the bus afterwards and get.
They were doing this in the city.
Yeah.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Because I could see it being in Millbrook, where Leary was, but this is in the jungle.
No, this was
urban
going
jungle.
On. And then he played a concert with Don Ellis.
Oh dear. Oh boy.
And with the New York Symphony, it was at a point where Bernstein was still conducting the orchestra, and every week there would be local guests.
Yes.
Go and play with the orchestra.
Don came in with the orchestra.
Yeah. So they had him play something, and so Barre got to go, and for a whole week they went to little parts of rehearsals with this whatever music they played, and Barre would go over and like to the bass section, and they'd let him, sit in and play a tune or something, and Bernstein got mad and said, "Hey, kid, get out of there now! Come on!" So
this was during the psychedelic week.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Or during in the same time frame that was happening. So by the end of the week, they do the concert. It's very successful, and so Bernstein. So he's on an elevator with with Don Ellis and Bernstein. And Bernstein says, so you guys need to come back at this certain point. And Barre said, well, I can't do it, actually. I'm on my way to Europe. And he said, Bernstein just stepped in front of him and went on talking to Don Ellis, and just like he was out.
Goodbye.
Okay,
Yeah, you're done.
I mean, Bernstein, obviously, if you ever watched any of his videos of him explaining to an audience.
Yeah, not a lot, but
sitting at the piano telling them, this is the theme, playing it. This is the theme of this movement, and it goes on. And then we get to this other, this is great. And he would have been, had he not been such a fiery teacher and so into teaching, which he had to teach everybody. TV came and he became America's, voice.
he did.
I can explain.
But you finish that. If he had not gone and been such a fiery teacher, what?
So he would have been considered, with West Side Story and the things he wrote, as the major composer of popular classical music.
I think for what it's worth, because at this nonprofit that I work at now up in Tucson, and we get a lot of donations, a lot of records, and I just feel like his discography will continue on in that vein, meaning like it's going to be impossible to ignore that legacy, regardless of whether he was a good teacher or not.
Yeah.
So he turns his back on Barre.
So Barre goes ahead and goes to Europe, gets to Paris, does music for some films that are famous in the underground, whatever.
Wow.
Somebody who had heard him, I don't know where.
Whoa.
I don't remember. And unfortunately, although Barre is less than 400 miles from us right now, his family lives in New Mexico. He has got breathing problems where he's no longer playing the bass. He moved from Paris, or from the south of France where he was living, where I visited him. Oh man, he lived in Saint-Philomaine, this beautiful place north of Montpellier, I think. And he had the sort of the caretaker's house next to a little church that was on top of a hill, and the little town had fallen through earthquakes or something. All the buildings had fallen down the hill, and there was a church there. We went there and visited after some concerts. We had a week off in the middle of France, and I knew Barre, and Dave Holland was going to be at Barre's, so we went. So Oregon went down there and spent a week.
Oh man!
And so I saw him, and Barre's a good friend.
He's not. Dude. I feel like we should take a trip to New Mexico to visit him.
He can't even. He doesn't even talk.
Oh dear, that breaks. Because I was going to say I want to hear that. I don't. It's bad enough he can't play, but I just don't like.